two-part question. Does anybody believe that in the near future, the state might require that the church does not speak about the issue of homosexuality from pulpits? And is this the time for the church to be doing anything besides the typical daily business of the church, considering the hour that we're in?
Those demands are already being made in certain venues. You already can't speak about homosexuality, calling it a sin, on the radio in Canada or England. I mean, that's already a pretty strict policy.
Football player was just released for tweeting.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think that's imminent. At least that's what secular culture is going to try to impose on the church.
Even inside of the church.
Yeah, but it's a microcosm of what you see, or you see this in a very clear way in the early chapters of Acts, when they tried to silence the apostles, and they just said, look, we have to obey God rather than men. And they preached the gospel anyway. And we have to do that with gospel truth, with everything Scripture says about what's sin and what's not. It won't dissuade me if they say, we'll put you in jail if you say homosexuality is a sin. I'll just have a prison ministry.
With Tony Miano.
Yeah.
Right. Go ahead, Tom.
Al would be far more in touch with this, but it just seems from a distance that the first step is going to be saying, if you preach on this, if you state that homosexuality is a sin, we're going to remove a privilege that you have, which is your tax exemption. That's not something that you've earned, something that has been given to you, and if you're not in step with where the culture is, we're going to begin to take steps to silence you. The first one not being probably jail, but some pretty serious penalty, and that's when the test really comes.
That was the conversation about property taxes. Before they start tampering with deductions for charity that come against the church, just remove your property tax exemption. That could put Grace Community Church out of business. If all of a sudden we had to pay the United States, the federal government, a couple $1 million a year for this facility, this would be devastating. The Master's College has 52 acres of prime land. If they took away our tax-exempt status, which could happen at a school, maybe faster than it might come to a church, we'd be done. We'd be out of business. That would be the end of that institution. They know that, and they need money.
That's why I began by saying our concern must be advocating in every way possible the freedom to preach the gospel and to preach the Scripture. And that's what is extended to this argument. All the legal mechanisms for removing tax exemption are there. The Supreme Court case several years ago, the precedent's there. Cultural pressure would make it very expensive for politicians to do that now, but don't count on that lasting very long. Just consider there are other parallels. There is non-discrimination language in virtually, first of all, in federal statute and in every state, to some extent, certainly here in California, on the issue of gender discrimination or gender distinction. And yet no one has tried to remove the tax exemption of Grace Community Church for preaching complementarianism. This is different. And so don't count on those parallels lasting. And this is going to require an awful lot of Christian vigilance. And this is where, quite honestly, it is a matter of the freedom of the church to be the church. Because we can preach under a tree, and we'll be willing to do that. We'll preach in prison if the Lord should so will. But I don't want to willingly give up the freedom for us to gather in this room right now. And the freedom to be president of a seminary sending out gospel ministers into the world. We can't surrender that. We've got to fight it to the very end, and we need smart lawyers and smart people, and we need lawyers with tenacity, and we need to start holding politicians accountable, naming names.